Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar focused on net zero carbon. It's great that you can join us today. I am really pleased that we have three great speakers to share some of their experiences and thoughts with us. My name's Gudrun Cartwright and I'm the Environment Director at Business in the Community. For those of you who don't know us, we are the Prince of Wales's Responsible Business Network, and we exist to help the UK become world leading at responsible business. So we have three key things that we campaign on. The first is around ensuring we have a skilled, inclusive and healthy workforce now and for the future. The second is around enabling our communities to thrive. And the third is about innovating to repair and sustain our planet. So the topic of net zero, it sits within the third area, but obviously it has implications for everything and everyone. So I'm really excited to be part of the conversation with you all this afternoon and to learn a little bit more. Just before I ask Emma Hal Boyd from the Environment Agency to speak, we've got a very quick poll we'd like to do to just get a view of where people are at the moment. So if I just launch this poll, hopefully it'll work. So the first question is, does your company already have a net zero carbon target? Okay. Okay, cool. Most people have voted. So let's close that poll. And I think, interestingly, most people don't at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how we get on after the webinar, and then I think we will move straight on because the other question was around when that is. So let's wait and see how we get on at the end of this webinar. So I would just like to welcome our first speaker, Emma Hal Boyd. Emma is the chair of the Environment Agency, and she has a background in finance and is a really strong advocate for collaboration and innovation to tackle our big shared challenges. So Emma, if I can hand over to you to share your thoughts and perspectives from the Environment Agency.
Thank you, Gudrun, and great to be on the webinar today and to join you at the start of the year of climate action, which also needs to be a decade of climate delivery. The Environment Agency is the environmental regulator for England. We also have responsibility for flood and coastal erosion risk management. So that has been taking up quite a bit of my time quite recently. The drought of 1976 led to £500 million worth of crop failure and food price rises. And by the end of August in that year, the government appointed a minister for drought. Almost immediately in September, there was such heavy rain that his job title was changed to Minister for Floods. These climatic shifts are becoming less extraordinary, and just last week, the Wildlife and Countryside Link produced analysis that showed that 2019 was one of the worst years on record for both flooding and drought. Half of the country experienced notably or exceptionally high rainfall, and half of groundwater indicator sites were at notably or exceptionally low levels, and some rivers dried up completely. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says the whole world has until 2030 to hold global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, or impacts will reach tipping points. The threat is characterised by individual impacts like the horrific flooding we have seen in the last month. But in planning terms, the climate emergency presents something that is more complicated than that. It is the unpredictable overlap of extreme impacts that threaten systems on our way of life, not a sequence of individual events to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. Guy Debelle, the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of Australia, has said, what if droughts are more frequent or cyclones happen more often? The supply shock is no longer temporary, but close to permanent. That situation is more challenging to assess and respond to. So to deal with this, governments, businesses and individuals need to be prepared. I welcome the £5.2 billion for flood protection and £200 million for innovation in flood resilience in today's budget. But we also need to look upstream. Climate impacts are only going to get worse unless we reach net zero. So in June last year, the UK became the first G20 country to set a net zero target by 2050. And the Environment Agency has set itself the goal of becoming a net zero organisation by 2030 to help show the way. This includes the carbon we produce ourselves, the carbon we consume through our supply chain, 75% of our emissions, and commuting to and from work. We will achieve this by reducing our emissions 45% by 2030 and offsetting what remains through activities including tree planting, restoring salt marshes, and peat bogs. And we've calculated this using the Science-Based Target Initiative methodology, which was developed by the UN Global Compact, the World Resources Institute, WWF, and the Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP. It helps organisations calculate the reductions that they need to make, define the scope which they should cover, and provides a credible basis on which to achieve net zero. This does not mean that we will stop building flood protection or pumping water to alleviate drought, but we will have to find new approaches to our duties. We have cut our footprint into chunks, each owned by an executive, and they have been tasked with coming up with reduction plans. We're working on tools to help people to make informed choices and are developing a programme of climate literacy for our staff. We're trying to adjust our processes to build climate into decision making, for example, with business case templates. And we're exploring how we can run carbon budgets alongside our financial budgets. We're also trying to use a community hydropower scheme to provide charging for our electric vehicles. Net zero is a major opportunity. And as the Governor of the Bank of England said recently, every company, every bank, every insurer and investor will have to adjust their business models. This could turn an existential risk into the greatest commercial opportunity of our time. All of you can help your organisations to get ahead of the curve on this, and I hope today's discussions will help. The coronavirus outbreak forced us to find an alternative way of meeting, but it's not stopped us. Indeed, because we're going to be recording this, we will allow more people to participate potentially in this discussion. So as we continue to discuss the challenges of our future, it's worth reflecting that we've already started using one of the solutions right now. Thank you very much.
Great stuff. Thanks, Emma. And you're so right. I think that, you know, the opportunities are huge, and we need to think about how we face into those opportunities rather than getting really worried about the risks. And there's a lot we're going to be able to learn from the coronavirus as we go forward and think about how we tackle the climate crisis. So thank you ever so much for joining us today. It's been really great to get your perspectives, and you know, wishing you all the best with your own target, and also you know, the continued responses to the floods that are happening at the moment. So thank you very much. So following on from Emma's introduction and setting the scene for us, I want to take a moment just to outline where business in the community is coming from, and to talk you through what we're doing on this on our campaign around helping UK PLC to think that 2030 is possible. So I want to start essentially, and apologies if this is not new to you, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, just to talk about what the issues are that we're trying to address here. So looking at these two graphs, we can see that the left-hand one shows that the ocean temperatures and the land temperatures are rising, and we can see that we've had 1 degree of temperature rise between in the last 100 or so years, and the right one shows the extent of ice in the Arctic and how that is going down. So we can clearly see that the climate is changing, and the climate is the long-term variation. So weather is what we see every day, and the climate is the long-term patterns of that. So we can clearly see that the land and the oceans are warming, and the ice is disappearing. And this is because the way that our climate operates is that sun comes in through the atmosphere and is trapped by greenhouse gases, so it warms the earth, and then it also is given off by infrared radiation, which means that we can be cool enough. But because we are putting more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, whether that's carbon dioxide or refrigerants or methane, these are the things that are meaning that the blanket essentially is getting more dense and not allowing the heat to escape. And as the planet changes in response to the warming, for example, with less ice, you get more dark bits of the earth. So whereas the white will bounce, the snow would bounce the radiation, the heat back up, and it would reflect it back out to space. When we've got dark oceans, then it tends to absorb it more. So the challenge is, how do we look at this in terms of restoring the health of the atmosphere to be something that we know can maintain a temperature that we can exist effectively in. So a few really, just some sort of warnings from key people, and I think you know, our founding patron, the Prince of Wales, he has been an advocate on this agenda for so long, and he very you know, clearly points out that we are the first people who can really see what we're doing, and the last that can fix it. Mark Carney, who's now moving on to be the UN's climate finance guru, is very clear and very stark in his warning. And you know, we have all of these young people who are starting to come up and tell us, you know, we're not just asking you what you're going to do now, we're coming to tell you that things are going to change whether you like it or not. So, you know, we have lots of impetus, lots of reasons to change. We need to be starting to, sorry, I can't turn my Teams off. We're starting to see what we need to do and how we need to do it. So one of the key points to flag, and this is one of the things that was talked about by the young people at Davos and the climate summit in New York last year, achieving net zero by 2050 will give us a 50-50 chance of staying under 1.5 degrees. As I said, we've achieved 1 degree already. So the science is suggesting that we need to get there by 2030, and that's also what the young people are asking for too. So the challenge for us as the people who are currently in the economy making decisions, is how do we bring together what the science is telling us we need to achieve. We have a finite carbon budget left to spend between now and forever if we're going to tackle this, but with the kind of economic concerns that people have and the challenges about how to make this happen. And as Emma said at the start, there's a huge opportunity, so we need to be able to find the path to the opportunity and make that happen. And we believe that together we can make it possible to achieve 2030 and make sure we are delivering a good life for the young people that come behind us. So in terms of what BITC is doing, we're going to be launching a campaign, and I just wanted to share the headlines of this with you in terms of where we're going, and we would love for you to get involved. So the first thing that we're doing is bringing together an alliance. So 2030 is possible. We're not saying everybody has to have 2030 targets. What we're saying is, how do we aim high? And if we slip a bit, that's okay. But it's about aiming high. It's about being positive and being optimistic and thinking about how do we make things happen at speed and scale. And key to that is going to be around working with leaders. So from across the different roles of an executive in a business, from marketing directors or finance directors or chief technology officers, what is their role in leading the transformation? And then how do we create those roadmaps that enable them to get there, and then work with younger future leaders to say, well, what do our professions need to look like? What are the standards? What are the skills we need to make sure we're part of the solution, not part of the problem? And then taking that forward into looking at some of the really practical things that need to happen. So what are the blocks? What are the challenges in the way? How do we come together as businesses? How do we get those young people involved in shaping solutions? And how do we get some action, some traction on those tangible, sort of challenging, sticky problems that we can't solve on our own? And then we've got between the business and the community network and beyond, there are thousands, if not millions, of people who are employed by the companies that we work with, and those people can make a real difference at work in terms of being thinking about what companies could do, how they can do it, and the coming up with their own solutions, but also at home, how can we help people do stuff at home? Can we all come together and help people to get good deals on electric vehicles or solar panels or something? And then how can we support the grassroots stuff that's happening by linking up some of the experts and the skills in our businesses with those initiatives? And then finally, it's all about collaboration, and we see that we have a real space in helping you all to collaborate, but we must collaborate too with other partners and with government at a local and national level to make things happen. So that is the headlines for what we're going to do, and then to follow that up with what you can do. This may sound to some people it may sound basic, to others it may sound hugely complicated. So we are in the process of putting together a series of sort of fact sheets and guides to help people go through this. But the first thing is to understand when you're starting from. So for people who don't know, and again I apologize if this is stuff that you all know, but when we talk about carbon footprints, we think in scopes. So scope 1 is the direct fuel you burn in your business. So whether that's gas for heating, or if you have a fleet of company-owned vehicles, the fuel you put in there. Scope 2 is electricity that you purchase. And scope 3 is things that are less within your direct control, but that you can influence. So supply chain, customers, commuting, business travel. These are the things that would come under scope 3. And there's a really interesting new scope that's being started to be talked about now, which is scope 4, which is around how are organisations contributing to the societal shift. So some of the stuff that we're starting to do as a network is around helping people at home and in their communities, which is how we all can collectively tackle that scope 4 and contribute more widely than our own businesses. So the next thing is to think about your target. Can you set a target for 2030, even though you might not know exactly how you're going to get there? I don't think anybody knows exactly the steps yet. If you can't, then how close can you get? And then share with us the things that are, would be blockers for you, so that we can collectively think about how do we unblock and make things happen. So think about, can you commit to working with BITC to help accelerate progress? Look at this, the 2030 Possible Alliance, and that will be launching that in April. And then really, how do you inspire others to be bold through advocacy? We're working to develop a pack to help engage C-suite leaders. So work with us to share your challenges and opportunities, to think about how you might want to get involved in that. Similarly with employees, and then as we sort of link, as we move towards our towards the COP in November. So the UK is hosting COP26 in November, and over the next 2 weeks, as we lead up to that, we will be looking at the opportunities to launch a series of guides that will take people through a process as we go. So those are essentially the headlines from us. Sorry. We would love to work with you. We would love to support you and help people to understand what to do and how to do it. So I am going to stop talking now, and I will pass over to Zoe from Jacobs to talk a little bit about what Jacobs are doing and share some tips with you in terms of taking things forward. Zoe, can I hand over to you?
Sure, thanks Gudrun, and good afternoon everyone. Thanks for having me, BITC. Happy to join this conversation. So my name is Zoe and I lead on sustainability at Jacobs. Jacobs, if you haven't heard of us, is a professional services business providing consulting, technical, scientific and project delivery for government and private sector. We have over $13 billion in revenue and around 55,000 employees worldwide, and our headquarters are in Dallas. So that context is kind of important, as our business is large and very spread out, and that gets to one of our challenges when we aim to get buy-in for ambitious enterprise-wide targets, such as this one that we're talking about here today. But first, I'd like to tell you where we're at on our journey to get to net zero carbon. What that means for us, and some key lessons or considerations for those sort of starting out on this journey. So next month we'll be publishing a global climate action plan, and within that will be our net zero carbon goal, or carbon neutral goal for our business. Our timeline will be ambitious, well within the 2030 range, as we as a business want to acknowledge the urgency and the critical need for businesses like ours to lead in this area. So for us, the detail that sits behind our net zero goal is what really matters. And on that, we have calculated our scope 1 and 2 emissions. So thank you, Gudrun, for the useful definitions around that earlier, as well as some of our scope 3 emissions as well. As a professional services company, our direct emissions, so our scope 1 and 2, are relatively low, and for FY19 calculated that as 159,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions. But as soon as we start to open up this measurement and look at what our scope 3 is, that number significantly increases. And in fact, when you add on our business travel, our scope 3 portion, business travel, to scope 1 and 2 data, it comprises of 60% of our total footprint. So knowing how material business travel is for us, we feel that we have to take responsibility for that. So when we set our net zero carbon goals and look to tackle and drive down our carbon emissions, we'll be going beyond just our scope 1 and 2 data emissions, and we'll also be including our business travel portion of our scope 3 as well. So to achieve an ambitious goal like that of net zero carbon, we will be reliant on strategy, a mixed strategy, some of which will be purchasing good quality offsets and also renewable energy certificates, at least in the short term. However, the focus is really going to be to drive down our emissions at source, and our plans will centre around that. So as well as targeting our business travel, we've currently got a goal to reduce business travel by 20% by 2022, and that's over a 2019 baseline. We'll also be looking to set a global carbon reduction goal using science-based target initiative as well. We'll be developing action plans to increase energy efficiency across all of our offices. We're already 100% renewable energy in our UK offices, and we'll be looking to scale this out globally too. So all of this we really see as getting our own house in order. And as a consulting professional services firm that delivers carbon, climate, sustainability services to our clients, this is really vital for us. So we don't feel we can be advising our clients in good faith if we don't do this ourselves and look internally and also lead by example in this area. So this has become business critical for us. And also we know that the best solutions that we can create will be when we collaborate and partner with our clients as well. So really happy to be presenting and hearing from Emma today from the Environment Agency, who are one of our key clients. We've been working with them for over 25 years and now currently partnering to help deliver their sustainability ambitions around their flood and coast risk management projects. So like many of our clients, the Environment Agency has looked to push down their ambitious net zero carbon goals down their supply chain. And for Environment Agency projects, we look to embed 40% reduction in capital carbon. So that's from early concept to construction phases, and then a 40% reduction in operational carbon across all Environment Agency projects. So these targets, these goals are really ambitious, some of our most ambitious from our clients. And we love that because really that helps us to drive the right culture and gets us to a place where we are thinking in that way. And then we can take that learning to other clients as well. So that opportunity for us to really influence in the areas that we work is a really important part for us and is an important factor when we look at what our climate action plan should be. So this critical feature of our net zero journey and how we can, the influence that we can have with our global client base to drive net zero design into our projects is going to be a big feature of our climate action plan. In the UK alone, we're working with some of the largest infrastructure projects, so Crossrail, Lower Thames Crossing, Thames Tideway, Anglian Water Alliance, Team 2100, and several others as well, where we know if we can do the right thing, the scale of the opportunity and the impact that we will have will be significant. So for us, this is material and critical for our business, and the area where we think we can make the biggest contribution to solving for the future. So in summary, a few lessons or sort of learnings, I guess, that we've observed along the way on our journey here are one, to really understand your own footprint, what is material and where you can have the biggest impact, and go after that. Two, don't forget the indirect emissions, so that's scope 3 data. It is trickier to get hold of, it's trickier to understand, but it's definitely worthwhile because this is most likely to be the sort of where the big numbers lie. And we really need as businesses to be accountable for these emissions too. Number 3, bring your senior leaders along for the journey. So demonstrate the risks of inaction in this area, but moreover, the opportunity in leading in this area. And then finally, number 4, acknowledging that offsetting isn't the complete solution. It is definitely part of the puzzle at this stage, and let's not forget it is a positive step and good action to take, but greater benefits to your business will come when you couple this with strong action around climate reduction. Thank you.
Fabulous, thanks Zoe. It's really great to see you know, the journey that you're on and some of the practical things that people should consider when they're getting started. So moving on, I'm really pleased to introduce Victoria from Shakespeare Martineau. And Shakespeare Martineau hosted a dinner with BITC last week in Birmingham, where we were talking about the risks and opportunities of climate change and net zero. And Victoria is going to share some of that thinking that came out from that dinner with us. Victoria, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Gudrun. Hello all. So as Gudrun said, the purpose of the dinner really was to enable people to share thoughts, ideas, and also challenges around achieving net zero carbon. I'm very pleased to say it was a really, really positive conversation, very ambitious, but also importantly, a challenging conversation around how we're approaching things. So just some short headlines to share with you all then. The first one being, it's okay to acknowledge as a business that we don't currently have all of the answers to get to net zero carbon. The fact that we can acknowledge that and talk to each other and work together and share ideas is what's going to make a 2030 target or even a target sooner a reality. The second one, building on that, was looking to collaborate with other businesses, share ideas, but also challenges, and be open about that. As an individual business, small businesses, medium businesses, and large businesses, we can individually make an impact, but equally collectively, we may be stronger in some circumstances and perhaps have a stronger voice to impact some changes in our supply chain. The third one, following on from that, was working with our suppliers. Again, this theme of collaboration. So sharing ideas with them, working with them, and helping to collectively create alternatives and different ways of doing things. The fourth one was around communication, education, and engagement. So building on from what Gudrun was suggesting, we as businesses can obviously impact our own business, our own people, and our own supply chain. But equally, we have the ability to impact a much wider variety of people than that. We've got a much longer reach, a much wider reach, and we can start to look at how we impact individuals in their home lives and in some of the things that they do. Fifth one, this has got to be right at the top of the agenda. It's got to be on every board's agenda, and it must be right at the top. And the last one, and the one I've reflected on personally the most since our dinner, is we as businesses have got to be really ambitious with the goals that we set ourselves. We don't always have the answers to get there, but importantly, we can achieve those answers if we work together. So right back again to that collaboration piece and pulling together all of the pieces in the puzzle to succeed. So that's all of the headlines from my point of view, Gudrun.
Great, thank you, Victoria. It was such a fascinating evening, and I was just blown away by how candid people were. And you know, some of the stories about like the personal stories and you know, thinking about how we take action at home and at work. So it was a very interesting evening, and I think there's lots for us to work through after that. So maybe we should have done this earlier. Apologies, everyone, but we are open for questions. If anybody has anything they would like to ask to the panel, please do let us know. You can type them. Elena, where do people put their questions if they want to ask them?
They have an area, section that says chat, and that's where they can type their questions and we will see them.
Perfect. Perfect, great. So as a starting point, if I'll ask a question to get us moving. I think it was interesting that on Sunday it was International Women's Day, and it's brilliant that we've got a female panel today for this conversation. And I know the focus of the march in London was all around women and climate change today. So I'm just wondering whether the what you think, Victoria and Zoe, about how we can encourage more women to get into to feel comfortable about becoming in a leadership space in making these things happen. So Victoria, I wonder if I could ask you that question first.
So I think it's partly creating an environment where people can see others and seeing them lead by example, so seeing the opportunities that are available to them. I think from my perspective, it's also about giving people an opportunity really early on to have a voice. So starting people at a very early age and through school and right the way through to see that they can really make a difference in this space and any other space. And giving them opportunities to then, in an environment they're comfortable with, have a voice to speak and give them opportunities and also listen to what they're saying.
Okay, great, thank you. Zoe?
Right, yeah, I agree with everything Victoria said there. Absolutely, all of those things are very important. I would say in my experience of, I've been working in the sustainability field for 20 years now, and I've always found it to be, in terms of sort of gender balance, fairly good. And I think it's, particularly around the subject that we're talking about now, it's an area that people feel very impassionate about. And, when we apply that to business and, purposeful businesses, I think we're seeing, more and more females and men, everybody equally have that voice and want to stand up for something that matters to them and engender and empower action around that. So, I'm encouraged to see sort of like what I would observe as sort of fairly like a good balance between the genders in this area, this work professional area.
Great, thank you. Okay, so it's not quite right with my screen here, but I can just about see some questions coming in. Hold on a second. So the first question I've got is, where can an organisation begin to determine what it can achieve when working towards net zero carbon? So Zoe, I'm going to ask you if you can just sort of give us some ideas around the first step to take, sources of help, etc.
Sure.
For businesses.
Yeah, no, I think it always feels fairly overwhelming when you're starting out on this journey, as where to start with it all. And I would say really understand the challenge for your business, and I think that is understanding your data, and that's certainly where we started off on this journey as well. Is you really need to have a handle on what your emissions are. And there's lots of great sources and tools out there available on the internet to help sort of guide you on that journey as well. So it starts simple. Look at your scope 1, look at your energy bills, look at what they convert into as carbon emissions, and really get a feel for your data, a good feel for your data. And I think couple that with what you do as a business as well. So where are your biggest impacts? So once you have your carbon data, looking at how that breaks down into different areas, and I think once you have an understanding of the breakdown of emissions across your business, you'll very quickly see sort of like the spikes in those data. And I would advise they're the start and prioritize in those areas as a first step.
Great, thank you. And Victoria, moving on to the next question, I know you came to our procurement workshop a few weeks ago, and you also talked a bit about this at the dinner. So how are you starting to think about engaging your supply chain, and what kind of responses are you getting to questions that you're asking them?
So in terms of, if I can answer the second bit first, in terms of the sorts of responses that we're getting, it's mixed. We have some suppliers who already have a journey and a plan that they're on and targets that they've got in place, and they've been planning this for quite some time. And then we have the other extreme, suppliers who aren't clear on why they should be doing this and don't have a plan in place. So the steps that we're taking in terms of engaging with those suppliers is for those that are more along the spectrum of we don't have a plan and we're not entirely sure why we should be doing this, and it's not at the top of our agenda, rather than stopping engaging with them altogether, we're bringing those into the business and talking to them about why this is so important, coming back to the education piece and the fact that our reach is more than just our own business, talking to them about what they can do, seeing if the plan is to see if we can help them on their journey to start to create their plan. And we can work with them and give them ideas on the sorts of things that we're doing to start them off, and equally, hopefully be able to put them in touch with other suppliers in our supply chain so that they can build their plan with help from others. So for us, it's very much a collaboration point. There is also a piece around buying power that I mentioned that we talked about at the dinner, where we may not have a strong enough voice as an individual business to really affect the kind of change that we want to see in some of our suppliers or some parts of our supplier chain. And where that's the case, what we're going to do is work with other businesses that have a similar supply chain. So for us, we're a law firm, it's professional services, and try and buddy up with them so that we have a collectively stronger voice to talk to some of our suppliers about why we want them to change and do that now.
Great, thank you. Okay, so sorry, I've got about half a centimetre of screen that's showing all of these questions, so I'm having to try and find them out, get them moving.
Would you like me to read the questions, Gudrun?
Yes, please, that would be great.
Okay, so we have another question. How are the people engaging with their supply chains? I guess you have already answered this.
That was the one I've just done.
Yeah. Another question, are there any standards and processes for calculating carbon emissions?
There are. So I'll start on this one if that's helpful. So we have the Greenhouse Gas Protocol is the sort of international standard that people work to when measuring and reporting their carbon. Science-based targets is an initiative that helps companies to look at what what does a 1.5 degree warming mean for them and how they can take that into account. And there are tools that you can use there are tools that have been created, quite a few of them by companies that you can then work with to offset your emissions through investing in schemes that take carbon out of the atmosphere. And I know that we're just pulling together some guidance and some support on this that we'll be sharing over the next few months. And I believe there's a guide from someone called Carbon Credentials, that's a guide to net zero. So how do we think about these different opportunities? But essentially, it is a data collection exercise in terms of getting the information from your bills, in terms of the fuel, the electricity, trying to understand how far your employees are commuting in and out of work, analysing your business travel, etc., then thinking, where are your biggest impacts? So, I think for all of us speaking on the call, our direct impacts are smaller than our indirect impacts. So, can you think about where they might, who are your top 10 suppliers in terms of spend, and what kind of things are they, selling you, so you can start to think about who are the key suppliers that we need to work with. Do Zoe or Victoria, do either of you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I think just to support that, Gudrun, yeah, we also use the GHG protocol as our standard, and that we work towards our greenhouse gas inventory and disclose to CDP using that methodology. But there is actually an international standard for carbon footprinting that is available as well, something called PAS 2050. Yeah. So the standard PAS 2050 that you can take a look at as well. That is becoming more, we're seeing more of our clients take an interest in that standard as well now.
Great, thank you. Shall we move on to the next question? Elena, if you could help read it out.
Rob Hopkins from the Transition Network is advocating more imagination in creating our future. Do the panelists have any ideas on tools or processes that could be used to harness the power of imagination to help business move towards net zero carbon?
I'm going to come to you, Victoria, if that's okay, to start us off on that question. It's a great question.
It's a brilliant question. I think from my point of view, it's about starting the conversation and getting as many people involved in the conversation as possible. So we are, as a business, engaging all of our people to come at this from different perspectives to our own, to see that what we can bring out of that. I think that the idea of getting our network involved, so whether that's schools, or we work with a lot of universities and engaging with them and their innovation labs, and how they're looking at this and bringing different views and perspectives to the table for what we can do as a business is a starting point.
Yeah. Zoe, any thoughts on that question?
Well, yeah, actually, this is hot off the press for us, because last night I was co-presenting with a colleague to an internal audience, actually, of some of our programme directors. And the topic was all on this, net zero carbon, and we actually applied a technique that we've just developed. It's Innovation as a Service in partnership with the Board of Innovation. We took the topic of net zero carbon on major infrastructure projects and programs, and did some interactive activity for an hour around future techs and trends, and how we, using those to inspire sort of an idea, a quick and rough ideation activity around, how we would be inspired by future techs and trends to look at potential solutions for net zero carbon infrastructure in the future. And we did this activity, I think we started at about 7 p.m. at night, and it was a room full of very tired, overworked, hardworking people. But in just half an hour of doing this, we, one, had a lot of fun, and two, came with really exciting ideas, which I think, we'll take at least a handful of those and explore them a little bit further as potential, creative solutions to use and potentially apply in the future.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'll just add a few comments here as well. So I have just read The Future We Choose by Cristiano Figueres. I can't remember his name, and that had some really interesting suggestions in there about, how do we imagine a better world than we have now. And there's a podcast called Outrage and Optimism that I would highly recommend, that is kind of pulling together all of the thinking about how do we turn this the outrage that people often feel into a sense of optimism for the future. And I think the thing that I would really like to see, and it's a piece of work we're starting to do at Business in the Community, is as I think Emma said at the start, is to how do we focus on the opportunities? How do we think and be realistic about the costs? So we know that there's a lot of information in the media about it's going to cost X trillions of dollars and it's going to require all these sort of changes in lifestyles, and it's very expensive, and we can't do it very soon because it will be economically risky. But actually the reality is we're going to spend money on infrastructure, we're going to spend money on energy, we're going to spend money on our food systems and resilience and all sorts of things anyway. The challenge is to help people understand that this is not either or. This is about saying we're going to do it anyway, let's do it in the right way so that we know that in the future we can be resilient and we are making a difference. So I think there's a really interesting piece around vision and enthusiasm and kind of belief that we can create a better life that we're not quite at yet, but it's definitely a core place for development and innovation. Elaine, have we got any more questions?
Yes. Do you know if there are any legal implications of stating a 2030 target and not achieving it beyond reputational?
I'm just going to say thank you to Emma Peddy, who's reminded me. It's Tom Rivett-Carnac who wrote the book with Christiana Figueres. There are no, as far as I'm aware, there are no legal implications of saying of aiming for 2030 and not achieving it. I think I think the reputational challenges are twofold really, because that it's clear, and I think most businesses who are setting ambitious targets would agree that we have we don't have the full route map to get there. So people are setting these targets with a view to being ambitious, being part of the solution, and doing their very best to get there. And I think the narrative we create around that in terms of reputation is really important. But actually you could flip that over and say, well, if I'm not making a commitment to be in line with kind of what the science is telling us and what young people are asking for, what is the potential risk to my reputation of kind of not being seen to be at the forefront of driving change. So I don't see that there being any legal implications at the moment, but things may change. I know that the UNPRI, Principles for Responsible Investment, wrote a really interesting report last year where they talked about climate. Basically, climate is coming, and in the next 5 years there's going to be a big policy shift. So I think that would be my feedback. I'm wondering, Victoria, as you're from a law firm, whether you have a perspective on that.
So first and foremost, disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, or certainly I'm a lapsed lawyer from the past, but no, I don't think there are any legal implications at all at the moment. And I couldn't agree more in terms of the narrative that goes around the 2030 target. So we as a business are looking at that at the moment, and we're definitely a business that we don't have all of the answers to get us to that 2030 target. I actually think it's really important that we are transparent as businesses, that we are being very ambitious, but that we do need to work together. There's a theme, as you can see. We do need to work together to solve how we get there, because what I wouldn't want to see is lots of businesses coming out with a target of 2030 or whatever it might be, and presenting themselves as though they do have all of the answers, because that then, for me, will make certain businesses think, well, we're behind the curve and we're not going to be open and transparent about where we are on the journey. I think the other thing that's really important in terms of reputational risk is, if you do set a target whatever that target might be, and you don't quite get there, it doesn't mean that you haven't made 90% progress to get there or 95% progress. So again, it's the story, isn't it? And there shouldn't be a reputational risk associated with that story if you can say you've done everything that you could to get yourselves as far as you could do along that route.
Yeah, I agree. Zoe, what about you?
Yeah, not much more to add really. You know, this isn't about it being a legal driver. I mean, it's not a legal driver, and it isn't about that for us. I think, you know, it's about being aspirational, and you know, this is a massive culture change. It's about organizational change management, and I think to be effective in that, you have to put your stake in the ground, and you know, putting something that's very ambitious and an ambitious time frame. Nothing is more effective than doing that. So I think it sets you on a course by doing that. Yes, you want to do absolutely everything you can within your power to make that happen and deliver on that. But you know, if you don't get all the way, then you're definitely going to get the way there if you set that bold ambition to start with.
Yeah, I agree. Elena, I think we've got time for one more question.
How is BITC going to engage senior leaders from major business in the 2030 is possible initiative?
So we are running a Seeing is Believing visit hosted by Jeremy Darroch, Chief Executive of Sky, in May, where we will invite a number of senior leaders from across different roles to come and be a part of the discussion and the exploring the opportunities. We are going to be running a series of roundtables that will bring different groups together to look at things from the perspective of their roles, their professions, and what might their roadmaps be, what might the challenges and opportunities be around that. And we'll also be doing some research on that topic. And then we are going to be looking at how we can develop some innovation sprints around key shared challenges. So for us, it's about having conversations on a one-to-one with our members when we see them. We also have a toolkit called Own the Conversation, Drive the Change, which our global goals team have developed, which is giving senior leaders the tools to have a conversation on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we're going to be having a big focus on pushing that conversation around climate this year. And then we are kind of just also going to be working with our practitioners to help them to find ways to you know, to get people involved and to make things happen within their businesses. So a whole suite of activities, and we're very happy to share more as we go forward.